probably has known Michael longer than I think just about anyone in this room, and that's his great friend Brooks McEwen. Brooks and Michael were at Duke at the same time, and Brooks took great delight in the fact that Mike was his fellow, and he would never pass an opportunity to tell Mike that he trained him. Brooks was a professor at Duke for many years, and just last year, I guess maybe 2 years ago now, Mike went down to visit Brooks, and they took a little tour on Brooks's boat from the west coast of Florida to the east coast of Florida, and had a lot of fun together. And Mike was still talking about the fact that I never realized how small Brooks's boat was. But that's the kind of guy Mike was, and Brooks is truly one of his very, very best friends. Brooks?
Thank you, George. As George said, my relationship with Mike is over 40 years, and but the exact nature of that relationship has always been debated between Mike and myself. I considered myself Mike's teacher, but Mike never considered him my student. Well, the nature of that can be, I'll give my side of the story and describe an episode where I felt I taught him a very important lesson. I was a junior faculty member and didn't have my own fellow, but I was on call every night because Robert Mockerman or Reese Landers were not going to come in at night or weekends. So when I was on call, a fellow would help me in the operating room of emergency surgery. And on a Sunday afternoon, an intraocular foreign body came into the emergency room. Mike was the fellow on call. I was the faculty member on call. So Mike was going to help me in surgery take care of this wounded eye. Well, it was a Sunday, and I had just started my faculty position, and I said, this is a great opportunity to have my wife Sarah come into the operating room and see how complicated and sophisticated vitreous surgery is. Because I've told her for years, this is so delicate and really important stuff. So we thought we could get away with it, no one was around. So she came into the operating room, and as usual, Mike, the fellow, was preparing the patient. He was prepping the eyes, and I was busy getting my gloves on and explaining to Sarah how complicated and delicate this was, and she has to pay really close attention. Well, meanwhile, Mike makes the incision into the eye in order to put the instrument, before the start of the operation. Well, as soon as he makes the incision, the intraocular foreign body pops out of the eye. The operation is over. Mike told me that he thought for a second, maybe I just better push it back in with my thumb. But fortunately resisted that temptation. So to this day, I think that my wife thinks, oh, this vitreous surgery is nothing. Anybody can do it. That was that story, but there was an addendum to that. About 15 years later, Mike and I are at a meeting, and Robert Mockenberg, the professor, is there, and we're sitting around the table, and Mike and I are relating the story to the people at the table. When we finish the story, all the guys are laughing and yapping it up, and Robert Mockenberg, with a deadpan face, says, "You mean Sarah was in the operating room?" So that was one story that confirms the fact that I did teach Mike some important lessons in vitreous surgery. Another story that comes to mind took place in 1990 at Arlo. Arlo was a scientific meeting where eye surgeons and researchers get together and discuss the latest in scientific findings. Well, Mike and I had a tradition that we would charter a boat at our boat, which was in Sarasota, Florida. And we would stay on the boat, and we would invite various people to come for a cruise in between meetings and scientific presentations. We'd go out on Sarasota Bay and cruise around, usually around cocktail hour. Well, this time it was several weeks before Mike and Karen were scheduled to get married in Michigan. And a lot of the folks in our boat weren't able to come to the wedding, so Sarah and I decided we're going to give them a surprise wedding. So unbeknownst to them, we had gotten friends together. I think George was there, Gary Abrams I know was there. Several people from this group were on this boat at the time, and they knew what was coming, but Mike and Karen had no idea. So we got out in the middle of Sarasota Bay, and I announced that as captain of the ship, of course, I could perform a marriage ceremony. So we had a formal marriage ceremony with I do's and all, and Karen and Mike were married. So I consider myself the first person who actually officiated a marriage ceremony with Mike and Karen. Now Mike and I, on occasion, would tease each other, almost all the time. And we did this sometimes very publicly. We were at a meeting, I think it was a ASRS meeting, several hundred people in the audience. And I was chairing a panel discussion, I think, on complicated retinal detachments. And at the end of the panel discussion, we would invite the participants at the meeting to come up to little microphones that were set up and ask questions or make comments. And during this portion of the meeting, I saw Mike come up to the microphone to ask a question, or more likely being a comment. And so I said, would the elderly, bald, corpulent gentleman at the microphone please identify himself? Without missing a beat, Mike says, yes, I'm Bruce McEwen. But I got my licks in too. Mike was, our universal argument of whether I was his teacher or not extended to another dinner, and we're talking about it all. And finally, Mike says, he didn't ever teach me a thing. And I said, and it sure shows. But Mike and I, Mike was my best friend, but he was far more than my best friend. I never had any brothers, but Mike was like a true brother to me. And we tried to be there for each other's triumphs and tragedies. I was there when Mike's first marriage fell apart, and he was devastated. He was there for me when I had emergency bypass surgery in 1997. He was there again for me when my oldest son passed away from sudden cardiac arrhythmias, congenital heart disease in 2000. And I tried to be there for him when Patrick passed away. And I think he realized that I was someone at that time who understood what it was like for a parent to lose a child. So Mike, to me, is a terrible loss that I will never really get over. But I loved him very much, and he is indeed a true brother. And Karen, I want to tell you that for as long as he's known you, he's loved you tremendously. And that you are an anchor for him, and you've always had his back. So we're all going to miss Mike, and no one's going to miss him more than I do. Thank you.